What's up guys, and welcome back to Mix Series. So in the last video we tackled drums, and that was a long video. This one is probably not going to be quite as long. We're going to be going through bass, keys, and electrics. And I think that's kind of where we're going to leave this video. So let's start with bass. So I have all of my processing turned off. I feel like I'm hitting a pretty good level on my inputs. I had to trim up the gain just slightly, but I feel like it's hitting at a pretty good spot. Whenever he hits hard, he's hitting at -12, and then kind of gradually gets lower than that. So let me go ahead and pull my drums down. Let's hear what bass sounds like on its own, with no processing on it at all. All right, it's a pretty basic bass tone. It's just a direct box, direct in, so there's nothing really going on there. There is an Aguilar tone hammer. That's what we're using as the direct signal, so it's a preamp box on his pedal board, but he's not playing with a pick or anything, so there's not a ton of drive on that sound. It does sound like a pretty dry bass tone. That's fine. It is plenty to work with for this sound. So bass is one of those things, I think, again, people tend to misunderstand it. So bass is a lot more than just sub frequencies. So I've seen a lot of people maybe don't understand bass and what it's supposed to sound like in a contemporary mix. Bass has so much going on to it. It is a guitar, so you've got to remember, and you're treating it as if it were one of the electric guitars. It's just lower. So it's going to be kind of filling out your electric tone together. So that's why I personally like a lot of drive on my bass, especially in big drivey moments of a song like this one. I like a lot of drive on my bass. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, I can tell right now this bass does not have enough drive on it for my personal taste. I like to add drive to it to fill out the low mids. And again, we're contributing to the electric sound. So what's cool is, on the X32, we have in our effects things over here, our little effects processors. I have on my last effects processor, in effects number 8, I have the guitar amp, which is one of those effects that I think people kind of overlook on the X32, probably for good reason, because I could not imagine a world where I'd ever use this on an electric guitar. It'd probably sound horrible, but it's in here, and it does something cool, I think, for bass if you don't have a lot of drive coming into the console. I think you can get it to sound really cool. So let's pull bass back up, and then I'm gonna turn the guitar amp on. If I go to my my bass, and you can see over here I have my little inserts. All the way at the end I have it inserted, and I can turn it on here, and I'm going to run pre-processing instead of post. That way it's as if it were hitting a guitar amp coming into the console, and then I can process it as I want to. So let's do that. All right, that's dry. Now I'm going to turn it on. That's pretty dramatic. Pretty big level change, so I'm going to pull the level down. All right, much less difference in level now, so that's a good starting point. So you can see we added a ton of drive to that sound. You can dial in the guitar amp as you want. Personally, these are the settings I like to use. I don't use buzz too much. I don't really know what it's doing, but it's not really anything I like. Punch and crunch are the two knobs. I think punch, if you could get away with turning it all the way up, If you just have like a dry bass tone, you could turn that all the way up. It would sound great. Crunch, similar, and then drive, I don't turn it up quite as much. And then the preamp knob, this is pretty subtle. I think it gives it a pretty subtle saturation. And then these ones are where you get more of that overdrive sound. I leave the cabinet turned on. That's as if it were like a guitar head into a cabinet. And kind of walk you through some of these settings and let you hear how they sound. Cool, so that's what it sounds like before I ever hit EQ or anything. So that's just going through that guitar amp sound. I did turn that buzz up a little bit because I feel like it was filling out a little bit more in the low end in a way that I liked. I do have in the little like EQ section on the guitar amp, I have the low turned up just slightly. There is something that happens when you add overdrive to a sound. It will tend, especially bass, it'll tend to lose some of the low end in the bass sound. So that's why a lot of guys will actually run a split channel. So you'll have like overdrive on the top, and then maybe you'll have like a dry low end that's just for sub frequency. I don't usually tend to do that. I've done it in the past. This, especially on an X32 where I'm limited on channels, I'll just run it like straight guitar amp like this. And then we can add some low end later. So that's the bass sound that we're working with. Let's go ahead and EQ it. So there's a couple things that I'm hearing right out of the gate. When I have all of this, this low end energy happening, there is in the overall sound of the bass, I'm noticing that between like 100 and 400 hertz, there's something there that I'm not super liking. Maybe it's just like a buildup of a little bit of low mids. I want to kind of tuck those a little bit and create some separation between the sub and the low mids in the bass sound. That's also going to help my my kick kind of punch through a little bit. There is a lot of energy in your kick that's like kind of in that area. Same thing with your toms. You want them to kind of cut through a little bit without having all that crazy muddy low end buildup. So I'm going to cut in that area. I'm not going to use any sort of low cut on my bass. I don't need to. There's no reason to do that. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use my top filter, my high filter, to roll off any of that weird hiss that we might be introducing from that guitar amp. That is something that I'm hearing in there. There's a little bit of hiss up top that we need to get rid of. And then depending on where we're sitting, we may try to add some attack to the sound. That is something that if he was playing with a pick, we'd probably have to actually pull some attack out, and we probably wouldn't be adding as much drive. Picks really, really help in big moments to give you a consistent driving sound. But since he is playing with his finger, it's a little bit more rounded in the bottom end, and not a lot of attack. So we'll see where we're at. Let's go ahead and start EQing it. And then we will add some compression, kind of see where we're sitting. And then there's another trick, a last trick that I want to show you with bass that sometimes I like to use on an X32. I definitely like to use it. It's some bus processing that we're going to do with side chaining. So let's pull our bass back up and start to process it. So I'm sweeping around in that attack area, and there's not really anything that I'm liking when I'm driving it a little bit more, when I'm pushing it. There's not a lot of information there already, so when I'm driving it, it's just making it a little nasally sounding, and I don't like that. So I'm not really gonna try to add attack. That would probably be a conversation with your bassist if you feel like you're not getting enough attack from the strings. You know, obviously changing strings frequently is a big deal, and people tend to neglect on bass. And then also playing with a pick in bigger moments. I'm telling you, that's a big thing when it comes to dynamics with bass, is being able to have different stages when you're playing it. If you know, you can play with your finger up by the neck when you're in a lower moment, and then when you start to really drive into it with the pick. I think that's a big thing that can really make your mixes sound better. So that's kind of where I would probably leave this. Maybe add a little bit of mid-range to the sound overall. We can kind of pull that up. Let's pull it up for a second and kind of hear what that sounds like. I don't hate that. I think that sounds actually kind of tasteful to add a little bit of that mid-range in. We may choose to reverse what we just did by the time we get to the rest of the mix. So let's go ahead and jump into compression and then blend everything in together later, and we may deal with that. All right, so as you can see, we are compressing that a bit. We're using a 4:1 ratio, and it's doing some work. Not doing a crazy amount. I think some people overcompress their bass. Just saying. But you can get away with quite a bit on bass because you really do want it to kind of sound locked in. A lot of that comes from how you're playing it, and I don't think that that's something you can correct with compression. I definitely, though, think that it is something where you want to compress quite a bit, just because it is low end, and you want that to be kind of like rock solid in your mix. But again, we're not split channeling this between like a low and a high channel. If I was doing that, I'd probably compress my lows like crazy and leave my highs a little bit less touched. Here we're compromising. So you could go in and actually use your mix knob here on your compressor. That's not something I tend to do too much on the X32. But if you want to, by all means, I think that it could sound really cool. Okay, so the last thing I want to do with bass is I want to pull my drums up. And I want to hear how my bass is playing in with my drum mix. And then I think we're going to add a little bit of sidechain compression. So if you don't know what sidechain compression is basically you can take a compressor on a channel or a bus, whatever, and you can key it in, kind of like earlier when we were talking about keying in a specific frequency range for your gate. You can do something similar with a compressor. You can actually have a different channel being the key for a compressor on another channel. So in this example, what I would do is I would use my kick drum, and I would use my kick as the key for my bass channel. Now, here's the thing. I'm already using my compressor on my bass channel, so how would I do this? Well, I'd run it through a bus that can allow me to add a second layer of dynamics processing. I try to do that when I can. Obviously, I am compromised because I am also using a lot of my buses for in-ear monitors to send to a P16s. As I do with this template. So I do try to do what I can, but with this, I definitely would like to do that just to kind of get my kick to punch a little bit more. And I think that you can make some cool things happen with sidechain compression. So let's do it. Pull my whole mix down a little bit. I'm already telling I can pull off that a little bit. Yeah, so I like what that's doing. I should have turned off the EQ on my bus compressor earlier. I forgot to do that. But all it's doing, yeah, I'll show it to you here. I'm taking a little bit more out of that those low mids and adding some low. Again, because I am on my channel strip, I'm using that that low filter to cut some of that. You don't have to do that. You could move a filter around and use your low mid filter. I do like to keep that one free just in case I want to add or drive a little bit more mid range. So that's why in here I have this here. And then because I'm adding all that overdrive, I am going to add a little bit more of that low end to the overall mix, to the bass sound. So that's what I'm doing with bass. You could hear in here, so channel 1 is the key source. The key is coming from the kick, and it is what is basically controlling the compressor for the bass sound. I'm not sidechaining it like a ton. A lot of people will make it really pump. I don't really like to do that. I don't like it to be like a super noticeable effect. I just want my kick to be able to come through. I think it's especially helpful if you have subs that aren't very good. If you're underpowered in your subs, I think it can really help to make sure that your kick doesn't get completely lost in your mix. But yeah, that's probably where I'd leave bass. Let's go ahead and move on to my keys. So I have some, it's a piano and pads basically blended in together here. Usually these would be 4 separate channels. I went ahead and just blended them into 2 channels so you can hear the whole keys sound. So let's go ahead and pull them up. Okay, so right out of the gate, what I'm hearing is he is overplaying just a touch in these moments. The other thing is that he's not fully lifting off the sustain pedal when he needs to. So you're getting a lot of the pad is kind of carrying over into like the next notes. It is what it is. There's some things we can try to do. We can tame some of those lows and just kind of make it so it's not quite as muddy. But yeah, that kind of is what it is. I'm not gonna try to process that out. But I am hearing that. So something to be aware of. That might be a conversation to have with the worship leader, or go talk to the keyboardists themselves and just let them know, hey, make sure you're lifting off your sustain pedal when you're changing chords and stuff, and try in those big moments not to quite play as like articulate play some more block chord stuff that's not changing as much. But let's go ahead and start to process this. So you notice I already have the low cut on. It's not really doing much. I just have it at like 40 hertz. I'm not going to roll it way up high because I don't want to kill the life of my piano. In the low end, I think that most of the time, that sort of stuff I think is best to solve at the with what you're playing. Not actually processing it. So, in big moments of the song, maybe I don't want quite as much like big subby low end stuff. Maybe in big moments of the song, I want to play something that's going to fit more with other things. So I think that's stuff more in like the parts that you're playing more so than the actual processing. But I'm also not hearing a ton of like crazy low end stuff going on here, so I'm not going to mess with it too much. I think that it's pretty safe to roll this up to about probably 80, maybe 60 hertz. Let's run it around 60 hertz. And I think that's enough to kind of get rid of any sort of, if there's any like weird rumble going on in the keys. It won't mess with anything else. Let's go ahead and pull our keys up and start to process it. So I think a low shelf here makes sense. I'm just basically taming low end, like across the entire sound. But I don't want to kill it entirely. So that's where I think some people might reach for a low cut and just go and pull it all the way up. I don't want to do that because I want to preserve the sound of the keys. I think it would sound really unnatural if I just ran the low cut way up. So I'm just using that shelf to kind of pull it down and tame it, just so it's not crazy in the mix. So let's see where we're at now. Set everything off. Set everything on. It's not doing much. Don't want to touch it too much. Let's go ahead and throw some compression on there just to kind of to tame things a little bit. There's a little bit of compression on the sound already. I can tell he's using the compressor on the keyboard. So don't want to do all that much because it definitely doesn't sound like it needs a ton of compression. But let's go ahead and pull some in because I definitely know we need some. Yeah, so that sounds pretty good. Again, not doing a lot to the key sound. As far as the melodic instruments go, I try not to do too much. I think pretty much everything that you're going to do when it comes to like creating their place in the mix, most of it really needs to happen at the source. Getting your, mic placement on your guitar amps right, your guitar amps, making sure your guitar's tones are good. Keyboard, same exact thing. This there's things that I would change about this sound, but we're working with what we've got, so that's where we're at. Let's move on. Keys, I think, are decent. I may choose to send some keys to my glue verb, but they do kind of sound a little smeared already, so I'm kind of. We'll come back to that. We may choose to do that when we start to put the whole mix together, but we're not there yet. So let's go ahead and take a look at electrics. Electric 1. So I do keep these split. They are not a stereo group. I'm sorry, they're not put in a stereo channel. And that is intentional because they are completely different amplifiers. So electric 1 left and right. Those are more of an A and a B, but I just pan them hard left and right. Same thing with electric 2. I think that electric 2 is actually using real amplifiers that are actually in the back room. And then electric 1 is on a Helix, but he is using 2 different amplifier models on each channel. So I do want to control those separately. There's obviously going to be some phase correlation, especially when you're using guitar pedals and like stereo reverbs and delays. Not all of them are created equal when it comes to how they create stereo image. So that is something to be aware of. Sometimes delays when they fold the mono, like by the time you're all done with everything, things will tend to sound a little weird. It is what it is. So electric 1, let's go ahead and process it. I'm going to focus on one side at a time. So I'm going to grab his left channel and pull it up. All right, I feel decent about that. So I'm probably going to come back to EQ once we start to process this other channel. But I'm going to do that same thing that I did with my overheads, and I'm going to copy. So home and utility and copy, and then select the other channel and grab everything and paste it to that channel. The other side. So now let's listen to the other side and see where we're at. Just heard some like weird resonance there, and so I'm taking that out. All right, so one thing I just did, I pulled the trim down on my first channel a little bit because I didn't notice a minute ago. Sitting just a touch hot. So now I'm going to pan them left and right and see what they sound like together. So I do feel like his left side is drawing my attention a little bit more. So probably what I mean by that is it's more present, which makes sense based on the amp model that he's running on that. But the left side is drawing my attention a little bit more, which means I'm probably going to lean his guitar slightly left. Now, what I mean by that is I'm going to keep my two channels hard panned left and right, but I'm going to turn up one side just a little bit louder than the other. And what that allows us to do is you won't have any sort of weird, they're not going to be combining together into the mono channel at all. It's going to be hard left, hard right, and you're just pulling one side louder than the other. As soon as you start to take a stereo electric guitar and sum it to mono, sometimes it can sound a little odd. And let me show you what I mean by that. Just one channel. And when they sum together, there's just a little bit of weird phasiness going on, phasey stuff happening. So I'm going to keep them completely isolated from each other. So EG1, I'm going to lean a little bit left. Let's go ahead and start processing EG2. So my compression, you noticed all I'm doing is the same sort of thing I was doing on the keys. I'm just adding a light compression. That's kind of like when he's playing super hard, it's not like poking through. I'm trying to glue it all back down. So let's look at Electric 2. And what's cool is now I think that this one sounds better actually lean to the right a little bit. So it works out. So I'm going to take my, electric 1 and my electric 2, and I'm going to blend them together and show you kind of how I would do this. Cool. I think that sounds pretty good. So what I would do probably from there is if one electric is playing more lead stuff, then I will kind of pull them up a little bit more than my rhythm. But most of the time they kind of share parts back and forth a lot. So it's going to be pretty even. And I don't want one side to feel more like weighted than the other. So now we've got bass, keys, and electrics pretty much processed completely. Let's start to blend in everything here. Let's pull all of these down, and we'll pull our DCAs up. We'll start with drums and then blend in bass, keys, and electrics and kind of see where we're sitting. All right, so I think that's a great starting point to kind of build from for the rest of the mix. So on the next video, we're going to be talking about tracks, playback tracks, and kind of what best to do with them. It's a really, really big topic, so we're really just going to be talking about how to mix them and kind of blend them in. Yeah, so let's see you in the next video.